Hello and welcome to Lexitecture, a podcast about word origins and histories. My name is Ryan, and in each episode my friend Amy and I bring a new pair of words to share their stories with each other and you. You can find our past episodes and the occasional blog post on our website at lexitecture.com. Follow along with us on Twitter and Facebook at Lexitecture, and if you really like what we do, you can support the show at patreon.com/lexitecture. Today's episode, Haughty and Orange. So, we're going to word.
We are going to word.
Would you like
Let's
to word
this
first?
shit.
Do you want to word first, or would you like me to word first?
I am quite happy to word first.
All right.
I
Take it
feel
away.
like this is probably a little word, but I loved it. So
Perfect.
So we're good. And it's funny. I have no story. I have no tale. You know me. I've always got a tale. But I literally just looked up. I actually started with another word, and then realised that I like this one better.
Okay.
So I will talk about that other word. But in terms of the decision of what I was going to talk about this time round, I just ground through some dictionaries until I found a word where I thought, oh, it's so hilarious to me. You know when you were a kid and people would be like, "Oh, have you been reading the dictionary?"
Yeah.
And I would be like, "Yeah."
Yeah.
So, like, oh, am I not supposed to do that? Like, it looks like all the other books. It's maybe a bit fatter, but
Yeah. It's still a book. Like, you can still, it's a thing you can just do.
yeah. Also, why not read it from the start to the end? That's always kind of confused me too. Obviously, I use a dictionary in the quote-unquote traditional sense. Like,
More traditional way.
yeah, I'm going to look this book up alphabetically. Fun fact, even as an adult, I majorly struggle with alphabetical order.
Right. Yeah. That's
I don't know why. There's maybe some like actual reason, or it might just be because Amy. But I every time have to sing the alphabet song to myself in some measure. Anyway, that's besides the point. So, from reading a dictionary, I found myself this cool little word, and the word is haughty.
Oh, nice.
Haughty, which, as well as being a cracking Scrabble word,
Oh, yes.
I also felt was a very interesting little tale, because haughty is, as defined by the OED, high in one's own estimation, lofty and disdainful in feeling or demeanour, proud, arrogant, supercilious. And it's from, the first OED citation is 1530. So it's been around a long time. And in 1563, there's a citation, and there are only four between 1563 and 1667. There are four B forms. The latest 1805. Me in the dictionary, once again, should have maybe read it a bit more carefully. Where it is of exalted character, style, or rank. So elevated, lofty.
Okay.
So in either case, this person is, well, they're high. They're high up in terms of rank, either because other people think that they should be, they're exalted, or because they themselves think that they should be.
Right.
And
okay.
I think, generally speaking, these days, we would use it as a, like, not a pejorative, but it's certainly not positive. So, things that are haughty are high. And it may
I think it's pretty close to a pejorative, though.
Yeah, I guess. It's like, it's not fun and nice, but also you're not going to, like, fight a duel over it, I guess.
Right.
But it might have occurred to you while I'm talking that haughty means high, as in haute, as in haute couture.
Yeah,
for example.
Right, of course, yes.
And yeah, that exact thing that just happened in your brain happened in my brain too.
Yeah.
And I thought, hey. And the reason that I actually came across this word, which made me think, oh, of course, was because the first word that the word I was originally planning on talking about today was the word skinny.
Okay.
And skinny, the etymology of the word skinny,
I
which
think I
dates
like
from
this already.
around about 1400,
I hope I'm right about
means
it.
resembling skin.
Yes.
It is, as haughty is, it is a word formed by adding a Y.
Yeah,
And
the whole having the nature of
exactly.
suffix.
And in both cases, it had never occurred to me that that's what that word meant.
No, until you said skinny.
And you go,
Never in a million years. Like, but of course.
skinny,
But
of
never.
course. And a person who is skinny, you know, their skin becomes more obvious because they do not have a lot of fat stretching out said skin, I suppose.
Yeah.
And so skinny jeans, to use a much more modern context, a much more modern usage, skinny jeans look like skin because they're tight.
Right. Yeah.
And
Wow.
yeah, so skinny, I was all set for skinny. Skinny is it's from skin, of course, and skin we have from about 1200, so a very, very old word. And it's an extended form of the PIE root sec, which means to cut, which I found really interesting. Because, of course, if you are, you know, fleeing animals or you are skinning fish, then you're doing that with a knife. And I like the idea that the word has formed from the doing of that thing to other things. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
I'd like, I mean, the past was a brutal place, but I'd like to hope that people realised that skin was a thing because they were removing it from animals rather than, say, other people's faces.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, like just in general.
But yeah.
But yeah, also, who knows?
Who knows?
But yeah, this this little Y suffix, it made me incredibly happy. And
Absolutely.
the OED has quite an extensive kind of description, but it's super cool. So I'm going to read it to you. So the OED says the general sense of the suffix is having the qualities of or full of that which is denoted by the noun to which it is added, as in icy, having the nature or appearance of ice. And in Old English, there was a very large number of such adjectives, many of which have a continuous history from the earliest times to the present day. In the case of some, however, there is a significant gap in the evidence, which suggests that they may have dropped out of use and been formed afresh later. That's how good the Y suffix is.
Yeah.
Even the words that get it and then die out, people are like, oh, that thing Y. There are some noteworthy instances of new formations in late Old English, like doughty, dusty, and snowy. To several Old English adjectives in IG, there were parallel formations. So icy, sandy, sandig, it would have been. And the disappearance of this latter suffix left freer scope of development for those other forms. In Middle English, the number of these derivatives does not seem at first to have been greatly increased. The following fresh coinages are exemplified first from texts before 1300. First of all, fresh coinages are exemplified. Those words just made me really happy.
Fresh coinages is pretty awesome.
They're delicious. So here are some of the wonderful Middle English examples taken from texts before 1300. We have dready, fiery, frighty.
Ooh.
Yeah, isn't that lovely?
Yeah.
Hairy, happy, needy, sleepy. This one's going to blow your mind, Ryan. Tidy.
Oh.
Yeah, right?
Yeah.
There are occasional parasynthetic compounds, but they're short-lived. In addition, the addition of the suffix to non-native nouns is at least as early as the 13th century, as in savoury in the Ancrene Rule. The 14th century, especially the latter half, was prolific in new formations. To this period belong angry, bushy, earthy, fatty, flowery, heady, hearty, milky, miry, mouldy, mucky, naughty, smoky, sweaty, and many, many more. The 16th century was also a prolific period. To it belong cottony, frothy, dirty, healthy, leafy, mealy, saucy, sugary, viney, woolly, and yeasty. Others, such as bulky, measly, noisy, which was apparently coined by the poet Dryden. So that means 18th century. 17th century. Dryden spanned both. Peppery, racy, skyey are recorded first from the 17th century. Later new derivatives tend in a large measure to be colloquial, undignified, or trivial, as bumpy, dumpy, flighty, hammy, limey, loopy, lumpy, lungy, messy, oniony, tree, I like that one.
Oh, nice.
Verminy, vipery, and some are from verbs, as in dangly. Contextually, the application of the adjective may be narrowed in any direction, as mousy, which is either resembling a mouse, quiet as a mouse, or infested with mouse. And a sense of very fond of is of modern growth, so things like booky or doggy or horsey.
Right.
And just everything about it is so
That's
delightful.
very cool.
Take a word, add the thing, new thing. And,
lousy is one of my favorites of those.
Yeah, right. So we have the OED the OED entry continues, but there are just so many lovely examples. Sluggy,
Lovely.
slummy, blowy, floaty, rollicky. And so I love that there are so many, but also I very much love that both skinny and haughty are ones that did not occur to me. And I should also point out that in the etymon line entry for the Y suffix, which covers most of the same ground as that passage that I've just read you from the OED, it mentions that after Coleridge's criticisms of the Y forms as archaic artifice, poets gave up stilly, paley, bleaky, bluey, greeny, and other colour words, lanky, plumpy, stouty, and the slang rummy. Vasty survived, he said, only an imitation of Shakespeare. Cooly and moisty he regarded as fully obsolete, but in a few cases, he notes, haughty and dusky, they seem to have supplanted the shorter forms. And that is exactly the case. Hot, as in height, I have never ever heard used in English. And the OED simply has it as a borrowing from French, corrupted late in the 16th century. And it says, so that the original HAUT was corrupted to HAUGHT after words like caught and taught, etc., in which the GH had become mute, perhaps influenced by high and height. It does make sense, particularly given that the words sound the same, but there's also another example of a word that has a similar meaning that takes that same spelling. But I was very curious about Coleridge criticising the Y forms. So I had a look to see if I could find something about that. I didn't come up blank, but I did come up against a fairly vast volume of literary criticism that Coleridge wrote, which, quite frankly, this week I did not have time to read. And searches didn't provide me with what I was looking for. But I did learn that Coleridge's Rime of the Ancient Mariner, very famously, it has several versions. There are several versions of the poem that exist. Basically, Coleridge wrote the poem and published it, and it was panned by various sort of literary figures of the day.
Yeah.
And so he revised it heavily and printed a second edition. The second edition is vastly different to the first. I suppose I could have said vasty if Coleridge hadn't gotten his way. And many of the revisions did take out archaisms, which had been criticised. For example, Wordsworth, who was, an absolute hero for Coleridge, Wordsworth criticised his overuse of archaic language in the Rime of the Ancient Mariner. So I assume that that's why Coleridge decided that this was, not a feature of his poetry anymore, and was thus perhaps critical of other poets who were using the Y formation. But I really love bleaky and stilly. Stilly is lovely. In terms of the haute part,
right,
we have a pirate.
nice.
And the pirate, which we get in the entry for hot, it's al, and the pirate here means to grow or to nourish.
Oh, okay.
So I guess in this case, to become high.
Yeah.
And there are lots of really lovely cognates brought to you by the University of Texas at Austin Linguistics Research Centre, Indo-European Lexicon of Pi, Etymon and IE Reflexes.
Hooray.
Reflexes. Sorry, there were just too many words going on there.
Yep, that's fair.
But in English, some of the cool cognates that we get, we have elder, as in an old person.
Okay.
We have a nobleman, elder man, which literally elder man. And all of those words that take age, ald, yield, as it was in Old English. We get adolescent and adult, people who have grown.
Okay, yeah.
We get alimony, an allowance, altimeter, all of those things that use that alt part of the word.
Yeah.
Also alto, as in the singing voice.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Yeah, which is rather nice. It's the second highest voice, the alto, but I did wonder about this because it's the highest male voice that occurs without, well, surgical intervention, shall we say.
Yeah.
Male altos are still fairly common. I remember back in my organist choir days, we had a really great male alto. But they tend not to be, you tend not to get male sopranos. So I guess in an etymological sense, female voices were a late entry to that kind of scene.
Yeah.
We also get words like proletarian, belonging to the lower class, so the opposite of that, and proliferate, prolific and proliferous, things that grow or reproduce quickly and abundantly. And I was also very delighted to see in the University of Texas at Austin's etymons, there is a Scots English version, and that's the Scots word auld. Now, auld, if you've never heard me say the word or if you've never come across it in print, it's spelled A-U-L-D.
Yeah, as in Old Lang Syne, right?
Yeah, exactly. So nice to see my one of my mother tongues, as people often say when they speak about Scots. I sometimes, me and Scots have an interesting relationship because Scots is a real language. And I said that not that long ago in a room where I was the only Scottish person. Everybody else there was a Swede, there was a Canadian, an Australian, who else was there? Someone from China, someone from England, I think New Zealand. It was a Pilates thing, but it was a very multicultural sort of day. And I said something about the Scots language and everybody laughed. Oh dear, no.
Yeah.
There is a hill I will die on.
Yeah.
Because people often assume that Scots is a dialect of English, and it is not. But when people in Scotland talk about Scots and talk Scots, they often do so in a kind of an over-exaggerated way that sounds a bit... Basically, it makes me feel like those people don't actually use those words and don't actually use that language very often. It's a bit like hearing somebody speak Scots in a very posh, almost English accent, and it grates a little bit for me.
Yeah.
Anyway, one of those things. the word mither, for example, as in mother tongue,
Right.
is a word that I might well use, but I wouldn't pronounce it mither, the mither tongue. And sometimes you hear people doing things like that, and
Right.
it feels weird to me. But anyway, nice to see a little bit Scots,
Absolutely.
and interesting that old and high, in the sense of growing up and growing on in years, have had that little crossover.
Yeah, that's neat.
So yeah, from haughty to skinny, with stilly and beery and a whole lot of other lovely examples in the middle. That's my
Absolutely.
word.
That is very cool. I really like I'm a big fan of the Y suffix. Huge fan.
Other things we say that literally nobody else says. I mean, no, that's not true.
No,
I'm sure
we're
there
here
are
with
other linguists out there who would
yeah.
enjoy that, but I feel like that's a Lexitecture t-shirt waiting to happen.
Yes, right.
I'm a big fan of the Y suffix.
Big fan of the Y suffix. It's it also had never occurred to me, for some things that make all the sense in the world but never occurred to me, is the way to adverbialize a verb is to add ly,
Right.
but it accomplishes the same thing basically.
Yeah.
So all adverbs, that's all they do is they just a verb with the nature of whatever, like.
And I do wonder,
like
again, it sort of vaguely skittered over the surface of the pond of my mind, why some are Y and some are ly. And I feel like that, that ly, when you're a kid and you first learn about adverbs, your brain tells you that they all end in ly. And
right.
then hopefully you have a good teacher who tells you that words like good are also adverbs. And and you have to, sorry, not good. What am I talking about?
Well.
Good is an adjective, well is the adverb. But that's your sort of, your shorthand brain goes, yes, ly. But I don't know if it's because, as it said in the OED, latterly that these words have sort of been formed that tend to be used in a more colloquial slang, almost comedy sense. So it does feel slightly kind of whimsical to create a word using a Y rather than an ly. But the historical precedent would very much seem to be the opposite.
Yeah. Can we go down a brief grammatical pet peeve of mine rabbit hole?
Oh, please.
Now that you've brought up the goodwill thing, on my list of things that I don't get extremely agitated about it. It doesn't, I'm not a psychopath.
Not yet, anyway.
The way. Not yet. Give it time.
Never give up on your dreams, Ryan.
People who answer the question, how are you doing? And they insist on answering it with well instead of good. That bugs me. Even though I know that well is the adverb, and even not even though, / because well is an adverb, and I think the answer most people are looking for is the adjective to describe the state of you, not to rate your proficiency at existing. How are you? I am well. I am. I do the act of being well, or poorly, or no. What is your current? You, a noun. What is your current state? An adjective. Good is a completely acceptable answer to the question of how are you? And people who insist on it being well think they know grammar but don't know it deep enough to really be able to parse the question and answer it. Play here.
Do you know, Ryan, it's not very often I get the opportunity to say this, but I've never actually thought that hard about it. I mean, you're entirely correct. One of my major pet peeves, and I'm going to blame that ocean between us, is when people say good when they should use well. You did
right.
Good. Ugh! And it's properly one of these things where I'm like, let it go. It's a thing now. It's become a thing.
Yeah.
This is how it is. That's not going back in the box anytime soon. Stop being such a curmudgeon. But I quite like being a curmudgeon. Also, you get to use the word curmudgeon, so what's not to love about that? But also, it is a bit of a pet peeve. It's never, to be honest, I guess I've been thinking about, in that particular usage, I guess I've been thinking about that in as though it's two different words, and it's not two different words, because like I am doing well, things are good. I guess I was thinking of it more in terms of like wellness, as in my health is good.
Yeah.
It's never really occurred to me that that's like a good well. I thought of it as a well.
Yeah.
Wow, language is funny.
It's true.
Yeah.
I enjoy Haughty a lot. I mean, speaking as we were before we pressed record officially, about
see the things we say before we
events
press record officially.
and stuff.
Absolute gold, diamond encrusted gold. No,
It's pretty
not
great.
true.
I like when we have serendipitous episode titles,
Oh,
completely as they must be because of the way we do this, accidentally and inadvertent. But there's something fairly current events delicious about the fact that this episode title will be Haughty and Orange.
Shut up.
So
How
that's
incredible.
neat.
Oh,
Keep
actual
it
clapping my hands. I don't know if you can hear it. As we mentioned earlier, that it's a little bit problematic.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Given our chats about various world leaders and their
Just so perfect.
their antics and stuff. So Haughty
So
and Orange. So
perfect.
Orange is my word today. I like this. This for a long time. For a long time it was true for me, and you'll often hear people talk about this being one of those questions, one of those classic questions without an answer, but there aren't many of those anymore. But of whether which came first, the color or the fruit?
I feel like I know
orange.
the answer to this question in some part of my brain, but also I have no idea what the answer to this question is. So I'm really excited to hear this.
Well, the answer is the fruit. But
Okay.
luckily, that's not all I have to talk about. So
The answer is the fruit. The end.
the end. Credits. Done. There's more to explore here by a fair margin, which is very cool. But yes, so the answer is fruit first, color later. So the English name for the citrus fruit first shows up in print, according to the OED's sources that they could find, in about the year 1400.
Okay.
And this is found in the glossary of a manuscript, which seems to prove, not that we needed more proof that things are used verbally before they're written down. So we have to always keep that in mind. But when it shows up, it's like when the first citation of a word shows up and it's a dictionary.
Yeah, sure.
Or a slang dictionary or something. It's like, okay, well, obviously this word has been around. This is proof positive that the word has been around for quite a long time.
Yeah, sure.
Before it makes it into print. So when it's in the glossary of a manuscript, that also serves to make that clear. So in writing in 1400, absolutely, obviously in use before that, but we can only go with what we have. So obviously, with that in mind, with the actual chronology of words being necessarily lost, it always ends in fuzziness. But sometimes, not all the time, the timing of you can trace the sense development of a word by the timing of the citations sometimes.
Yeah, sure.
And in this case, it seems like it fits. Like sometimes you'll get a usage of a word, a sense of a word that is generally quite technical usually, or it's like a definition of a term that uses this word. So it might make sense that it would be a lot closer to the time when it was actually first used. People might have read it before they used it, as a general rule sometimes. But other times, so in a case like that, sometimes you'll get a word that was cited later, but it's hard to fit it in because the other words may have been used long before they got cited, but this one probably was read around the same time, if that makes sense.
What came first, the reading or the speaking?
Yeah, I
say the chicken.
I'm lost, but
Yeah.
I think, okay. as long as somebody around here knows where I'm going with this, it doesn't have to be me. That'd be great, because I just lost myself. So I think I'm back now. But it does seem to fit this. So I'm going to organize this just when I run down the list of senses. I'm going to run down it chronologically by citation, because it roughly tracks. So the OED definitions for orange as a noun, 1400, 1.1a, any of various kinds of citrus fruit with a usually reddish yellow rind when mature and an acid, many-celled, juicy pulp. Specifically, A, more fully Seville orange or bitter orange, the fruit of Citrus aurantium, whose pulp is bitter and which is now used chiefly for making marmalade, and B, more fully China orange or sweet orange, the fruit of Citrus sinensis and its varieties, which has a pleasantly acid pulp and is used for making and eating and making juice. So, and the Citrus aurantium, like that, it's got that the gold, like golden citrus.
Yeah, sure.
Basically, because there's that Latin, that aurantium. Like,
aye.
So, and in the definition, various kinds of citrus fruit with a usually reddish yellow rind. So, for anyone who's like, well, the color orange definitely existed before oranges, and like people in England and the UK and the British Isles in general were obviously familiar with the color orange.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a popular argument for why people, or a popular explanation for why people might think that the color in that color versus fruit debate of which came first in English, that the color would be first, because obviously the color's been around for as long as the visible spectrum, right? So, but they knew the color, they just called it reddish yellow or golden, or used other words for it, like we all do for colors, because there's no objective, whatever.
Don't get me started on the whole.
I'm not.
Yeah, we're just, we'll stop. We'll not even go there.
For more about colors from people who are smarter and better than us, go to the Endless Knot, because they have a couple.
Oh yeah, they have some awesome
amazing
color stuff.
exploration of color stuff in history. So, hats off to our very own Gandalfs, Mark and Avon. Go listen to their stuff on color, because they are awesome. But yeah, so those two specific sort of branches of orange, and then it's got bergamot, blood, Jaffa, mandarin, navel, Portugal, satsuma, tangerine, orange, etc.
Yum, yum, yum.
As all these different definitions like the other options. But orange ultimately it categorizes in one of those two places.
Okay.
1450, the standalone noun orange starts getting used in writing as just shorthand for orange tree. So in that garden, in that wood, there were many trees, beeches, elms, maples, and oranges.
Got it.
Like that.
Yeah, that makes sense.
1532, it shows up in writing as an adjective, as in the color of an orange. So, while again, usage precedes and predates written examples, in this case, there's like a 130-year gap.
Yeah.
In the written record between oranges, the fruit, and orange, the color of the fruit. So, you can be as confident as you can be that that's the order that this went in.
Yeah.
So in 1557, and this is, again, these things with dates confuse me sometimes because I just don't know enough about how the OED dating system works, I guess, because the OED dates, the citation is 1557, but when I looked up the source, in the source itself, it says that it's dated from 1552, 53, and it's it's an English law, and I'm going to get to that in a second. But it's not the color of an orange. It's just it becomes a standalone noun as opposed to an adjective, right? So an orange something, or just orange the color, the noun name for the color.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So this 1552/1557 question mark citation is from an English law that, and this, the thing about only us and the people who listen to us or who would like listening to this podcast would ever get this. So it's definitely an in thing. The fact that I spent It does. It's none of anyone's business how long. Reading through laws and acts of parliament from 1552/1553. Yeah.
Yeah,
I think that's one of those
listen, what you do in your own time is your own business.
Yep.
I think we can all agree on that.
Absolutely.
And if that happens to involve 15th century statutes, then
So
I
be it.
hope you enjoyed yourself.
That's between me and Jesus. So what this particular law was going on and on and on about was different kinds of rules about the production and sale of various types and styles and weights of cloth, including colors.
Ah, nice.
So here we go. Buckle up, friends. And I'll have a picture of this. I think I can add pictures to the show notes, but I might throw this on the website, or definitely throw it up on Blue Sky and on Facebook and stuff. If you're still following us on Twitter and you are on Blue Sky, please come over to Blue Sky because it's a better place. So it says, and moreover, be it enacted by the authority aforesaid, that no person or persons after the said feast of the Nativity of St. John Baptist shall sell or put to sale within the realm of England any coloured cloth of any other colour or colours than are hereafter mentioned. That is to say, scarlet, red, crimson, moray, violet, puke, brown, blue, black, green, yellow, blue, orange, tawny, russet, marble grey, sad new colour, azure, watchet, sheep's colour, lion colour, motley, iron grey, friar's grey, crane colour, purple, and old medley colour, most commonly used to be made above and before 20 years last past. Now, first of all, I don't know what other colors there are, because that's a long list.
There is so much I love about this, Ryan. Like there's so much. So first of all, I believe it's puce.
Nope, it's Pewke.
Sorry, spell that again.
Pewke.
Puke.
It sure is. Now,
wowzers!
So
did puke become puce because people didn't want to think of vomit?
I don't.
Even though puce is exactly the color of vomit.
Correct. I don't think it did, because I looked up puke because I was fascinated by what that meant. But by the way, this is in Great Britain Statutes at Large, Volume 6. That's the book.
Did Ryan read 1 to 5?
Listen,
Let's not even between him and Jesus.
This is what I'm saying. Leave me alone. My business. So
this is why we're friends.
Right? This is it. So I was immediately sidetracked by the existence of puke, and where I found the answer is in an MIT color index listing.
Wow.
And what it lists is, it looks like a sort of, to my eye, it looks like a sort of shade of burgundy. Oh. If you are curious, and I will definitely put this in the show notes for your reference, if you are curious as to what color this is, because MIT had a list, I actually have that information for you. So go to a color hex code site or program or whatever, and input the hex code 722F as in Frank 37, 722F37, and there you will see what color puke is according to MIT. That's as good as I can get.
Oh.
But you can go do that, and it's a kind of burgundy. So I don't think it became puce because I can see why it fell out of favor as a word. And at some point I will be looking into puke. But
I'm very interested in the fact that I did exactly as you said, and they call the color wine or red wine vinegar, all of which can make you puke quite copiously. True. If you apply yourself assiduously enough.
If you really dedicate yourself, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, like there are scientists everywhere.
Yeah.
Wow.
So
also, there are I'm about to make a highly sexist and perhaps somewhat patronizing statement.
Super.
Okay?
Yep.
But
love it.
You're like, yes,
love
buckle up.
This.
Well, I often joke that do you remember in the 90s, Ryan, when your computer monitor, depending on which version of Windows you were using, was either set to like 256 colours or like 8.
Yep.
Do you remember when that was a thing?
Absolutely.
And I often joke that in our house anyway, my husband's colour setting is 8.
It's the 8-bit. Yeah.
Yeah. And mine is 256.
Right. So you're Nintendo. You're the Super Nintendo. He's operating on NES colors.
Right. So I know, for example, I know what Odinil looks like. I am aware of the difference between beige and taupe.
I see.
My husband looks at me as if to say, what are these words? And from the noise you just made, I suspect that you also perhaps do that.
Like in this list, for instance, I raise my eyebrow at the difference between tawny and lion color.
So tawny immediately... I've probably told you the story before because I love it so much.
Okay.
But I used to work with a wonderful woman and a staunch supporter of Scots, the Scots language.
Okay.
She's an English teacher. She was my first boss. I love her. And she is from Aberdeenshire in Scotland, so northeast of Scotland.
Right.
And in Aberdeenshire, they speak Doric, which is a
yeah.
Oh, you know about Doric, right?
I do.
So, Doric is the again, people would call Doric a dialect of Scots, and other people would fight me about that.
Right.
But Doric is impenetrable and crazy, even to people in Scotland who speak Scots.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
So there are two cracking stories that came from this particular colleague. One was that when I worked with her, it was around about the time in the UK where you could text a landline and the phone would ring, and when you picked up the phone, an automated voice would tell you that you had received a text message.
Right.
And then it would read aloud to you the text message.
Got it.
Right? In an automated BT centralised voice. And her mother used to text her in Doric. So then she would hear the automated voice saying things like "fit like quine," "fit like quine," and if you're interested, means "how are you doing, woman?"
Okay.
But yeah, so that made me laugh a whole lot. But my favourite Doric with Diane story was one day I went to school. It was an in-service day, and so we weren't wearing teacher clothes. And I had on a pair of shoes that were a sort of beige colour, right?
Right.
And Diane looked at my shoes and went, "Oh, I love your shoes, fanny coloured." and I looked at her, and she looked at me with this enormous grin plastered over her face because she knew exactly what she was doing. And
course.
She repeated, "fanny coloured." And I went, "What the fuck, Diane?" And she explained to me that, so Tawny made me think of this, that one of her neighbours when she was a little girl always used to refer to things of that colour as fanny coloured, meaning fawny coloured. Fawn coloured. So my shoes, which were fawn, were indeed fanny coloured.
Right. Wow. That needs that explanation and backstory.
So, yeah, I did enjoy the fanny coloured shoes. I love how many words for red there are in that list.
Yeah.
Because, what do we have? We had crimson.
It's scarlet, red, and crimson are the first
Scarlet,
three. And
red,
it's like,
crimson.
okay, you're really covering your bases there. That's good. I mean,
I kind of love that people in the 15th century had a better understanding of what those three things were than, like, my brain sort of goes, don't they all just mean red?
yeah, and I
but
mean, russet is
presumably-
a red-ish color
Yeah,
as
of
well.
course.
It's
So
on there.
presumably people would have known the difference between crimson and russet. Or I guess some people would have known
Some
the
people,
difference.
yeah. Enough people that they put it into this obscure law about you can't sell a certain type of cloth after the Feast of the Nativity of St. John the Baptist. Like,
Yeah.
okay.
But also, like, I mean, and again, like, straight to Mark and Avon for this sort of information. It's out with my field of knowledge. But colours were for rich people, yeah?
Presumably, yeah, because dyes were very
Yeah, dyes are
particular
expensive,
and expensive and hard to get.
and coloured cloth was expensive, and very much, the availability, like purple obviously was the
Yes.
king's colour, because the resources for the dye, the dye was extremely expensive. But it does, the fact that there's a law like that, obviously, like you can't always tell if a law is applied equally to all citizens, because
Of course. It never is, yeah.
yeah, it never is. But also, does a law apply does it apply more to one section of society than it does to others?
Right.
And in this case, were rich people being taxed on their colourful clothes?
Yeah, I don't know.
But also, as you say, what other colours are there, dude?
That's the thing. Like, it implies that there are colors. Like, if they have to limit it to this, it definitely strongly implies there's a whole bunch of colors out there that people would otherwise be tempted to produce cloth in and now can't. But
yeah,
it's got most of the spectrum there. So I don't know what else is going on. But anyway, so that's
also, why does this law exist? Like, let's not
Correct.
skip over that fairly important question.
No, it's yeah.
But then
Now this section, I should say,
cloth is such a, like, if you look into the sort of socio-economic history of fabric, it's fascinating. Did you know that Gandhi visited Yorkshire in England to take a look at the living conditions of spinners, people who worked in mills,
yeah.
in order to take that information back to India?
Huh.
Yeah,
Makes
utterly
sense, yeah.
bizarre.
That's cool.
And like in Britain, the history of fabric is I mean, it's the history of language. It's, in some cases, it's the history of society. It's a very sort of quite a niche avenue that actually has a lot of really broad applications, because the production and sale of textiles was enormous. It was an enormous source of wealth, of economic wealth to the whole of Britain. In fact,
for sure.
Dundee, where I live, is it's sort of cheesily known as the city of jute, jam, and journalism. And the jute wasn't produced here; it was produced in India, and it was milled here. But there were more mills in Dundee than I think in any other place in the UK in the sort of 18th century.
Yeah.
And the city was rich because it was the second city of the empire, and that was because we had the means to produce jute.
Interesting.
And when the jute trade died, the city, the economic life of the city changed dramatically.
Yeah, of course.
Interestingly, shout out to my local town history. There is an enduring myth that marmalade was invented in Dundee.
No way.
Since you mentioned it earlier on, by a woman named Janet Keeler. Now, Keeler's was a business, a concern in Dundee for many, many, many years. It doesn't exist anymore, but it did, like, within my lifetime. And Keeler's jam and Keeler's marmalade was an instantly recognisable Dundee product. But of course, as with so many foodstuffs, it seems that Janet Keeler was the first person to sell it. And the first white person to sell it.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so variations of and versions of the thing we call marmalade have in fact existed for a long, long time. But it's almost like a QI sort of factoid that marmalade is from Dundee. A lot of Dundonians would tell you that without realising that it's not, strictly speaking, true, because there is that association with the city.
Interesting.
Yeah. What a find, Ryan.
Right?
Awesome.
Not bad. So there's the list of colors. So that's 1552. The other thing is, the reason this is trickily dated is that the English, so there's a marginal note, not like marginalia, like an actual printed note beside this section of the statute that says it notes that it was repealed. It was later repealed. Mm-hmm. But the way they date and the way the book itself is dated, which is why there might be some confusion, is that it's in the year of whatever king.
Okay.
so the third year of whatever's reign of whatever, right? Like that is how they organize these statutes. So that's why it's kind of, it doesn't say 1552, 53. It says in the, the third, 40th year of whoever, or 20th year of whoever. And then I looked up that king and it was like, wait, that's 1552. So why 1557 by the OED? I don't know.
Yeah.
Anyway, so there's the color. That's the standalone color as a noun for the color. In 1562, an orange was, and this is specific to heraldry, a tawny-colored roundel. And for those who aren't up on heraldic terms,
everybody,
which is everybody, a roundel is a design that is a circle in the middle with two concentric circles around it. And what you're thinking is the plain insignia for the RAF, like the blue, white, and red circles, that looks a lot like a target, which I always thought was a weird choice to put on fighter planes in wartime. Like just paint some targets on the bottom of your plane, but whatever. I'm not king, so I guess I don't get a say. But that always seemed weird to me. But that's a roundel, and a tawny-colored roundel was just called an orange.
Interesting.
Then we continue our journey, 1731, and we get a new noun sense of orange. And this is kind of a colloquial term. Any of certain varieties of apple, pear, apricot, etc., with a skin that is orange or has an orange-red flush when ripe. Also a tree bearing such fruit. And usually there's a distinguishing word. So an orange pear, an orange apple, an orange apricot, but it could also just be an orange, but you would know from context that you're talking about apples. Does that make sense? So like Red Delicious, Granny Smith, and orange.
I mean, this makes sense because Cox's orange pippins are apples.
There you go.
They're mentioned in Danny, the Champion of the World. He talks about picking Cox's orange pippins with his father from a tree behind the cabin that they live in. And when you shake the apples, the pips rattle.
Nice. Okay. Yeah, so there you go. Perfect. That's exactly the thing. What's interesting to me is that it sort of came full circle. Like it was the fruit, then it was the color of the fruit, and now it's different fruit or the color of the fruit that it gets its name from.
Yeah, that's super cool.
And it gets better. So etymology wise, it arrived in English through French, and specifically, the same thing here. So pomme d'orange, an orange apple. The OED says, and that's the French where they think, the old French where it came into English. OED says, probably after Italian, melarancio, a compound of mela, apple, and arancio, or arancio, orange tree. So again, an orange apple. And then post-classical Latin, pomum arantia, or Dutch, because Dutch is so awesome, orange apple. Orangeappel. Just what it says on the tin.
Just exactly what it says in the can, yep.
When you get back far enough, and we're talking like Persian, Sanskrit, Arabic roots of these words. So even from like, it's kind of interesting because we're now going, so far it's been fairly standard, right? English, French, Latin. But the Latin came from Persian, Sanskrit, Arabic roots before, which is not where you'd normally see that's not where the trail would normally go.
Yeah, absolutely.
So and in the Persian, Sanskrit, Arabic roots for it, they all start with an N and are some variation of naranj or naranja or naranja or something like that.
Isn't the Portuguese word for orange naran?
Yes, I think so.
Yeah, I feel like I've seen that before somewhere.
So the OED says that the O to start the word in the Anglo-Norman and Old French forms is probably after the form of the place name Orange, and we're going to come back to this later.
Good. I've been trying very hard not to interrupt you all the while with, but what about Orange? What about William of Orange? What about Orange in France?
Oh, believe you me, we are getting there. So,
Awesome.
but it says it's perhaps also influenced by the Anglo-Norman and Old French or, meaning gold, with reference to the color. So,
And that ties in with the Latin, the botanical name of the...
yes.
Yeah.
Citrum aurantium. Yeah. So it's one of those two things. So it's the O at the beginning from the earlier spelling, with an A at the start, is possibly explained above. Like that explains that. So either the place orange or influenced by the color, because the color looks like gold. Gold in Old French and Anglo-Norman was or. So there you go. The loss. So the OED explains how the original N got dropped off from the Persian, Sanskrit, Arabic roots when it arrived into Latin and Italian and French and stuff. So it says it probably results from absorption of the N when preceded by the indefinite article.
Oh, I love words like that.
Though in some cases, such forms may
orange.
reflect loss of the N already in Arabic. So it's possible that the N already was dropped by the time it went from Arabic to Italian, French, Proto-Italian, Latin, post-classical Latin, all that stuff. But it's also when you have an naranj, eventually you just have an orange, and it just gets absorbed and lost in the mix, and then eventually the N just disappears like a street magic sleight of hand trick.
As someone who frequently refers to them as noranges, this makes me very happy.
Yeah, you're just well, and it also says, and this is shout out you, Scots form niranj shows attraction of the N of the indefinite article by meta-analysis. So in apparently 19th century Scots, they brought back the N.
Love it.
Possibly from just a reversing of the process.
Aye. Yeah, that's very cool.
So it went from an orange, 19th century Scot, an orange.
Yeah.
Nirrange is how they spell it.
And
Now,
yeah, that's tremendous.
Yeah. The native home of the orange is thought to be Southeast Asia originally.
Oh.
And the name might have originated, that was harder than it needed to be for some reason, there. And in the Middle Ages, the bitter or Seville oranges were brought by Arabs to Sicily and then where it spread to the rest of Europe. And the sweet or China orange was brought from China by the Portuguese in the 16th century.
Wow.
So that which explains the Persian, Arabic, Sanskrit.
Yeah,
because
they
first would have been brought by Arab traders into Italy, Sicily. So there's the Arabic Sanskrit. And then by the time the Portuguese brought the Chinese variety to Europe, there already was a different variety that was called this. So it just got the same name.
You know, it's funny. I was just laughing at myself for being such a fucking colonist because it has absolutely blown my mind that oranges are from Southeast Asia. Because I don't know why I think entirely of... I sort of think of the Middle East when I think about where oranges are grown.
Right.
I don't even know if that's accurate. That's just the thing that's in my head.
Yeah. But also it's so strongly connected to places like Seville and just southern Spain and Mediterranean anyway, that it's like...
And like Italy, the citrus grown in Italy, that's
a little
huge...
like tomatoes for Italy. Like,
yeah,
what do you mean
course.
Italian food never used to have tomatoes? Well, it's because nobody had ever seen a tomato in Europe until the 15th century, end of the 15th century. So
I know, crazy.
Of course it didn't. But it's so associated with it now that you kind of go, by default, you sort of think it must come from there. They must be native to... So anyway, yeah, so that's cool. So we kind of have firmly trod on the ground connecting the color and the fruit. And now we bring out, because of course we do, how the association of the color became united with Protestantism, the Irish, the Dutch, all these different groups. And so the term orangeman has a surprisingly, it has a bunch of different meanings, or a surprising number of meanings, I guess. Depending on where you are and who you are, you obviously will default to one or the other, or have never really heard of the term, possibly. But, the orange stripe on the Irish flag, the name of the Northern Irish Protestant folks, like modern day or 18th century secret society variety, or subsequent things that stem from one of those things, or the Dutch connection, like Syracuse University has a mascot that's an orange, and it's associated with the color orange. All of these things, in one way or the other, do come down to a dude named William.
Okay.
Sort of. So, speaking of things that it's hard to tell their original chronology based on the time that they're released and published, I've already recorded a solo episode that I'm sort of probably going to save, and this one will come out first, so this may not make, but I might do it the other way around. You'll never know until you listen. Pay no
attention to the man behind the curtain.
Exactly. But in that solo episode, one of the things I'm looking at is a handful of guys that fall into the class of people who are so unfathomably wealthy that when stuff gets named after them, it's actually getting named after the name of the place that they're currently subjugating. So they sort of get something named after them, but they sort of don't really, because it's really ultimately about the place. It's a toponym rather than an eponym situation, if you dig hard enough. So in this case, because we're talking about William of Orange, more specifically, William III of England, born November 4th, 1650. Now, this is etymology, not history, so I'm not good at either of them, really, depending on your standard for good. But anyway, shut up, me. Keep talking. So on Etym Online, they have a breakdown of Orangemen, where they kind of go into a very brief sort of 3-paragraph history of this. So, 1796, reference to members of a secret politico-religious society founded in 1795 in Belfast to promote Protestant power in Northern Ireland, and this was named after William of Orange, who became King William III of England, and was one of the Protestant kings in that back and forth between Protestantism and Catholicism in the UK and the British Isles that went on forever.
Yeah, neither of which things existed at that time.
And so he, William of Orange, William III, was of the German House of Nassau, and his cousins and their descendants constitute the royal line of Holland. So that's the connection there.
Okay.
The Dutch royal family were, in this time, cousins of William of Orange, King William III of England.
Isn't monarchy fun?
Because everyone's cousin.
Ryan, I have to tell you, I read a brilliant story this week about how police in Yorkshire, which is in the north of England, the police force were circulating a sort of a public campaign, posters and billboards and stuff like that said, "Do you know anyone who is living a lavish lifestyle but does not appear to have a job? Could this be excuse me, could this be suspicious? Please report these people to the police."
Oh,
and
I can only
so
imagine.
many people have been reporting the royal family.
Yeah.
Because obviously.
Because of course
Yeah, made me laugh quite a lot.
I love that.
Sorry, continue.
So the name, the place that this is, like William of Orange. So what is Orange in this case? It's a town of Orange on the Rhone River in France, which became in 1530 part of the Nassau Principality.
Okay.
And again, Nassau was the family line of William III, William of Orange.
Right.
The Roman name for this town was Arausio, which there are 19th century sources that claim that was from the Latin aura, a breeze, and a reference to the north winds which rush down the valley.
Oh, interesting.
But this might be folk etymologizing. It might have been a folk etymology of a Celtic word. Not really sure. But the name subsequently became. I know that in historical linguistics, like corrupted is used as a term for a process, but it sounds like, I don't know. It sounds judgy. It was changed. It was adapted. It was corrupted to auranche or auranche, Auranche, and then through softening to orange. The town, this is from Edam Online now. The town has no obvious association with the fruit other than being on the road from Marseille to Paris, along which masses of oranges were transported to northern France and beyond.
That's such a lovely coincidence. Like, as far back as whenever, as far back as history.
Yeah.
You can see I'm not a historian either. As far back as history, people must have been going, do you think those round things are why our town is called that? Or do you think it's the other way around?
Yeah, exactly.
Like watching the carts roll by. What's that? It's an orange. Wait a minute. What?
So does the Protestant Northern Irish movement and the Irish flag and the Syracuse University motto and all these things and the Dutch national colors and flag and national and royal colors and stuff, do they have anything to do with orange as the fruit? Yes, because the name of the color comes from the name of the fruit, but also yes, because it comes from a place which isn't named after the fruit, but has become to be named after the fruit because what it was named originally sounded a little like the name from the fruit, and the fruit was transported. It was a major shipping route for the fruit originally, and so it became named after the fruit, but not really. But kind of, because it sort of already was.
You
Make sense?
Could not make this shit up.
No. I certainly could not.
You absolutely could not. You'd take that to an editor and they'd be like, fuck off. Just no, don't be ridiculous.
Yeah. That's insane. All of this is insane. You're insane. Get out of my basement. Yeah.
I mean, yeah. I have to tell you a wee story. Yesterday I had the very great fortune to drive to Aberfeldy, which is a town in the Highlands, and it's not miles of it's maybe only about 40 miles from Dundee, but because of where it is, it takes about 90 minutes to drive there, right? And it's in a glen, it's in a valley, and I had to drive up over the hill to get down into the valley, as generally happens with geography.
Right.
But
yeah.
long before I got to the hills that I had to drive up, I could see in the distance as I was driving out, I could see this valley where there was this beautiful low-lying mist, sort of like a horizontal line of what looked like cloud sitting below the top of the hills, but not quite as far down as the ground. It looked very spectacular and very beautiful. And then when I started to climb the hills to get up to drive down into Aberfeldy, I realised that it was the same valley. So I drove. It was a gorgeous sunny day, and as I got up the hill, I drove into the mist, and then when I drove down, Aberfeldy was in beautiful sunshine again. So it was a lovely. It's a lovely part of the world anyway. If you've never been to Aberfeldy, you should go. I had an appointment there, but after I'd been for my appointment, I went to see the Fortingall yew. Fortingall's a little village just outside Aberfeldy, and the yew tree is believed to be 5,000 years old.
Jeez.
It might be the oldest living thing in Europe. It might be.
Wow.
But anyway, so as I was driving along these quite small, windy country roads in Scotland, and it's March. Well, it was February yesterday, but it was so the colours are very autumnal still. There's sort of russety orange earth, and there's greyish golds, and everything's quite kind of muted. And as I was driving along this tiny little road, on just on and at the side of the road, there was the skin of an orange or a tangerine, and it was like a neon contrast to the whole rest of the landscape. And I remember thinking, imagine a person who's lived in this place their whole life, the first time they saw an orange. Like,
Yeah.
it must have been a miraculous thing to see, because probably people were not dyeing cloth bright saffron orange, probably.
Probably.
And the landscape, and, you know, like, orange exists in nature, of course,
Yeah.
but in Scotland, in the sort of, you know, the flora and fauna that you would see, there's nothing as absolutely neon bright as the skin of an orange.
Yeah.
And yeah, it was such a lovely contrast, and it made me think about that. Like, I often use the analogy, like, you know, it would be like trying to describe a colour I'd never seen before.
Yes, of course. Yeah.
And I often think about how incredible it would be to see a brand new colour for the first time. So I love that this one has had such a crazy, storied, quite convoluted and remarkable history and etymology.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
Colours are
fabulous.
neat. So there we go.
Haughty orange.
Haughty and orange.
And that's it for another episode of Lexitecture. To get in touch with us about something you heard this episode, you can email us at words@lexitecture.com. You can also follow along and talk to us at Lexitecture on Facebook and Twitter, and at Lexitecture Podcast on Instagram. For back episodes and the occasional blog post, visit us at lexitecture.com. Thanks very much, and we'll talk to you again soon.